I'm Rod Serling. You're listening to the Zero Hour. Rest your eyes. Exercise your imagination. This week, Tobias Wells' neo-Gothic tale of small-town terror. A Die in the Country. Starring Peter Marshall. Susan Strasberg. And Andrew Duggan. In Elliot Lewis's production of The Zero Hour.
The Mutual Broadcasting System presents The Zero Hour. This is The Zero Hour on Mutual Radio.
We all know that city living has become increasingly troublesome. Our cities are crowded, high-pitched, and in many instances dangerous. No one knows that better than the cop. This week, a story of a handsome young couple in search of rural peace and quiet. Knut Severson, detective first grade, Boston Police. Married 1 year. Wife Brenda, 7 months pregnant. They've heard so much about the beauty of life in the quaint New England countryside. The picturesque 3-story Victorian house in the placid little college town of Wellesley seems the answer to their dream until they meet their neighbors, until they hear the town gossip and find themselves in the middle of a nightmare. Their story, A Die in the Country, begins. Picture this, a small New England town, green rolling hills. Tidy houses along quiet, tree-lined streets. Respectable facades covering what manner of guilty secrets. A Cadillac glides solemnly around the corner, purrs to a stop in front of an empty 3-story Victorian house with silent, shuttered windows.
Well, there it is, just as I described it.
It's kind of odd looking, isn't it? I mean, it seems off balance. It's so tall and narrow with that high peaked roof.
3 stories, Victorian architecture. It's most picturesque, but thoroughly modernized. The most up-to-date plumbing and wiring throughout. And as you can see, freshly painted, and the new porch was just finished. Come along, I'll show you everything.
Brenda was right. The house looked odd. Like the kind of house a child might draw. An oblong box set on end with a pointed roof on top. There was a big window in the front with small panes, and a cement and cinder block porch around 2 sides with a wrought iron railing. The shutters were dark green, and there was a post lantern at the end of the driveway, a pair of coach lanterns flanking the front door. A spacious yard and lots of trees and shrubbery. Mynheer, our cat, would find it a whole new lease on life after his cloister days in a Boston apartment.
It's a great deal of house and ground for the money.
I agree. What's wrong with it?
As I said, the owner has a sudden transfer out of town and must sacrifice. The reduced price bears no reflection on the condition of the property.
It's really quite rustic.
Oh, yes. Why, you even have a little patch of real woods on one side.
This yard would be the devil to mow.
It's nice and private. You can barely see the house next door through all that shrubbery.
That place looks a little neglected. What kind of neighbors come with the house?
Oh, that's Mercy Bird's place.
Mercy Bird?
She's a writer, mystery stories.
Really?
Yes, lives alone there since her mother died, and keeps pretty much to herself. She'll not be any bother to you, I'm sure.
Sounds like fun, living next door to a mystery writer.
And you have a very distinguished neighbor across the street. Rudolph Wharton lives there.
Sorry, but Who's Rudolph Wharton?
Oh, of course. You wouldn't know being from out of town. He's one of our selectmen. And I imagine he owns nearly half of Wellesley's most valuable real estate.
I stand impressed.
Come along. I'll show you inside the house. Truthfully, Mr. Severson, there aren't too many houses in Wellesley in your price range.
I was ready to say we'd try someplace else in that case. I could feel my hackles rising. You see, I have very sensitive hackles. But Brenda tugged at my sleeve as Mrs. Maynard turned the key in the lock and opened the door.
A creaking door, just the right Victorian touch.
Our spring rain. A little oil will take care of that.
As Mrs. Maynard led us around like sheep to the slaughter, Brenda exclaimed over all the pluses while I ticked off all the minuses.
A winding staircase. Oh, it's just what I've always wanted.
The woodwork needs repainting.
3 big bedrooms, imagine.
2 of them are going to have to be repapered.
And a bathroom off each one.
There isn't any John on the first floor. But as we followed in the wake of Mrs. Maynard's grand tour, treading on bright blue wool all the way, we came together on the view from the 3rd floor studio bedroom. It was strictly as advertised.
You see, I wasn't exaggerating a bit, was I?
Oh, it's just lovely.
Yeah, the view's great. I have to admit that.
And the bathroom has just been retiled. It's well heated.
I just love it, honey. What do you think?
Well, it needs a lot of work. I mean, I don't know when I'd have the time. Maybe we'd better keep looking. 1 week later, we signed the purchase and sales agreement. And 1 month later, we moved in. When you're in love with your wife and she's 7 months pregnant, if she asks for the moon, you see what you could do.
Don't worry, darling. We'll take our time. And it'll be fun making it really ours.
Mine hair seems to have made it his with no problem. The second I let him out, he streaked off into the woods.
Oh, this is going to be a beautiful place for the baby. All this grass and trees and lovely peace and quiet.
It's downright bucolic.
Oh, Newt, you do like it, too, don't you?
Honey, it's going to be just what the doctor ordered for a tired city detective after slaving all day over a hot murder.
Here you can leave murder to our next-door neighbor.
What? Oh, Mercy Bird, the mystery writer.
I wonder what she's like.
So far, we've yet to get a look at any of our neighbors.
They're being thoughtful, I imagine, giving us time to get settled.
I still don't think it was too wise taking on a big move like this just before the babies do.
Oh, it's just the thing. It'll keep me busy. No time to mope.
Mope? About what?
About looking like an old sack of lumpy potatoes, that's what.
Oh. Hey, honey, let's let all these boxes go hang for the rest of the night. What do you say we try out our new fireplace? Take a little of the evening chill out of our new house. Right now, I feel like cuddling up in front of a cozy fire with an old sack of lumpy potatoes in my lap.
You've been reading up on the care and handling of lumpy pregnant wives. What was that?
What was what?
I heard something at the door. I think someone's out there.
Oh, for Pete's sake, it's probably just the cat. I forgot he was out. Relax, darling. I'll let him in. I thought so. Come on in, Mynheer. Hey, wait a minute. What have you got there? Hey, what's he got in his mouth?
Oh, Newt, it's a squirrel.
You mean what's left of a squirrel? Well, I guess we'll have to expect things like that. I mean, living out in the country.
Oh, Newt, get it away. I think I'm going to be sick.
I found it took me longer to commute from Boston to Wellesley than I'd figured. I'd landed smack in the middle of outgoing commuter traffic at 6 p.m., and while the pike moved well, the arteries on and off it were going slow. By the time I finally got home, I was on the irritated side, and finding a strange car parked in the middle of the driveway blocking my way did not improve my disposition. What the devil?
Newt, we're in the kitchen.
Who was we, I wondered. At the moment, I wasn't in the mood for anybody. I made my way through the boxes of books and bric-a-brac in the living room into the kitchen where Brenda and a middle-aged woman with bleached blonde hair sat over coffee in the middle of boxes of pots and pans and dishes.
Darling, this is Mrs. Parsons.
You will have to forgive my coming before you've had a chance to settle, Mr. Severson. But it's rather my job. I'm the official town greeter.
Mrs. Parsons has brought us all kinds of lovely little gifts.
Goodies from all our local shops. It's our way of welcoming you to our little community. I'm sure you're going to find it a lovely place to live.
Thank you. I think we'll enjoy it fine if we ever get some of this confusion cleared away.
Well, this is a beautiful old house. And like most old houses in New England do, it has its share of history.
Really?
Well, you know, of course, that Catherine Lee Bates once lived here.
Catherine Lee Bates?
She wrote America the Beautiful.
Oh, no, isn't that exciting?
And Monsignor Davis actually died in one of the bedrooms upstairs.
Died?
Oh, don't worry. It was of perfectly natural causes. He was 88.
Well, that explains it.
But then I imagine you're far more interested in hearing about the living people of Wellesley, particularly your immediate neighbors.
I imagine we'll be meeting them in time.
The Farleys, at least. In the house caddy corner across the street. They're quite congenial. But their children are something of a problem. Teenagers. Boy is a college dropout, shiftless, long hair and a beard. And their girl is only in high school and already runs around with a very fast crowd. Heading for trouble, both of them, I'm afraid.
Well, let's hope not.
Your other two neighbors are inclined to keep their distance. Mercy Bird, next door, is a writer. I don't think a soul in town has ever been inside her house. And I'm sure you've heard of Mr. Wharton across the street.
Yes, we have.
He keeps quite to himself since his wife disappeared.
Disappeared?
Well, I don't mean in that sense exactly. Still, she did leave very suddenly, and no one seems to know where she went.
Mrs. Parsons, are you implying that we have a town mystery on our hands? Perhaps a body buried in the cellar?
Oh, good heavens, no, nothing like that. Why, Rudolph Wharton is Wellesley's most prominent citizen.
My husband didn't mean that seriously, Mrs. Parsons.
Oh, of course. You are a detective in the city, aren't you, Mr. Severson? I suppose detectives have their little jokes like all of us.
I suppose so, Mrs. Parsons, but right now I'm afraid I'm just a tired city detective, so if you'll excuse me,
Oh, as a matter of fact, I must be running along. I'm afraid I sometimes overextend these little welcoming calls of mine.
Oh, not at all. It's been just lovely meeting you.
I'll see you to your car. Mine's in your way. I was sure Mrs. Parsons had elected herself Wellesley's official greeter. It was the ideal job for the town gossip.
Now, don't be too hard on her. It was nice to have someone to talk to. She didn't really say anything harmful. She wasn't catty.
Speaking of cats, have you seen ours?
He made a beeline for the woods again. I just hope he doesn't bring home any more surprises.
Honey, cats are hunters. It's their nature. Now, mine here just never had a chance to do his thing before.
He's always been such a gentle house cat. I never thought of him as a predatory animal.
Well, he is. He just can't help it, that's all.
Yes, he can. That's like saying that killers have to kill.
They're two different things entirely.
That's mine hair. It sounds like he's in trouble.
Maybe this time he got hold of something too big for him. Now, you close your eyes until I see what it is.
Whatever it is, don't let him bring it in.
Well, hello there. It's all right, honey. It's only a dog, I think.
I'm afraid my Algernon scared off your cat. He didn't mean to. Algernon loves cats. He's very affectionate, but he just doesn't realize how big he is.
And I imagine our cat will learn to stay out of his way.
I just wanted you to know that Algernon won't hurt him in any event. Algie wouldn't hurt a fly.
I'm afraid that's more than can be said for our cat.
I'm Newt Severson, and this is my wife, Brenda.
Oh, delighted. I'm Mercy Bird, your next-door neighbor.
Oh, we're very happy to meet you.
You're a detective, I hear.
You're a mystery writer, I understand.
One thing sure about this town. It's a grapevine. I may have some questions to ask you sometime, Mr. Severson. Do you mind?
Questions?
Research for my stories?
Oh, sure, if it's something I know.
Well, it's going to come in handy having a detective right next door.
Look, isn't that another of our neighbors, Mr. Wharton, the selectman?
That's him, all right.
The grapevine slipped up this time. Distinguished isn't the word. Handsome would be better.
Well, he's a looker, all right. I'll give you that.
You sound as though you don't like Mr. Wharton very much, Miss Bird.
Don't call me Mercy. I never stand on ceremony. And as for Mr. Wharton, you're right. I don't like the man very much, not at all, in fact. Now, come on, Algernon, come on. Let's finish our walk. Let our neighbor's cat get home in peace.
Come by again, won't you?
Oh, I will. Algernon insists on his walks. Ta-ta.
Goodbye, Miss Bird. Mercy. Quite a character.
Oh, I like her.
So do I. But I wonder why she doesn't like the handsome, distinguished Mr. Wharton. When my first 2 days off came up, I had already managed to deal with most of the boxes. Confusion was gradually changing into order, and Brenda was busy at the sewing machine making new curtains for the big picture window. So I decided on a few hours busman's holiday and went downtown to look in on Wellesley's police station. There was an officer there named Dennehy that I once worked a case with.
Great to see you again, Severson. What brings you out to Wellesley? Official business?
No, we moved here, my wife and I.
Ah.
An old remodeled house on House Street.
Ah, yes, I think I know the one. It's right across the street from...
Ralph Wharton, right.
Right.
He's really Mr. Big in this town, isn't he?
Oh, he owns half of it. A block of stores, a medical building, a rest home, you name it. Say, it may turn out to be a handy thing for us. You're living right across the street from Wharton.
How's that?
Well, you can keep your eyes open. Somebody's got a big hate-on for that guy. He's been getting a series of poison pen letters ever since his wife left him last January.
Hate mail?
Uh-huh.
I heard Mrs. Wharton just disappeared. Nobody knows where she is.
The rumor factory. The truth is she went to California to live with her sister. We have a letter from her confirming this.
Confirming it? Why was that necessary?
Those letters Wharton's been getting. Wait a minute. I'll show you a photostat of one of them. You see? They're always pasted up words cut from newspapers and postmarked from the next town over. Natick. Here, you want to read it?
You may think you can get away with your wife's murder, Rudolph Wharton, but you can't. I won't let you. Signed, The Great I. The Great I? Sounds like somebody's playing a joke.
You're new to Wellesley, my friend. Nobody, but I mean nobody, plays a joke on Rudolph Wharton.
So Dennehy asked me to keep my trained professional eye on the Wharton house for any sign of a suspicious character hanging about. It seemed that somewhere in Wellesley, a nut was running loose.
Why would anyone make an accusation that could be so easily disproved? It doesn't make any sense.
Crank letters don't have to make sense. They're a nuisance, to say the least, and any nut who writes them may be capable of almost anything.
Well, it's probably just someone who resents Rudolph Wharton's position and power. If he were receiving a lot of anonymous love letters, I could understand it.
What about our friend Miss Bird? She apparently doesn't think of him as any paragon.
But you don't think she'd be writing him poison pen letters, do you?
It would seem more her style to just go over and tell him off. But a cop learns quickly enough not to rule out anything.
Oh, dear.
What's that for?
We moved to this lovely, peaceful little town to get away. Now you're going to be a detective even when you get home. Going to start looking at everyone with that suspicious cop nature of yours.
Now, honey.
Well, it's true.
Only when there's a reason.
Oh, there's always a reason. If you start looking for one, people aren't perfect. You can't start putting them under a microscope without seeing things that you shouldn't see.
I didn't know you felt this way about my work.
Oh, Newt, I don't mind your being a detective. I'm proud of you. But please, just try to remember that this is where we live now. It's not a police precinct. It's our home.
I know that, but I mean...
Oh, these people are our friends and neighbors, not suspects.
All right, honey. I'll remember that. Go ahead. Whoever it is, you can let them in. I promise I won't turn a light in their face and demand that they confess all.
Mercy. How nice. Come on in.
Without Algernon this time. Thought I'd spare your cat. When's the baby?
2 more months.
Got a good doctor, I hope.
Mm-hmm. A very good Boston gynecologist, Dr. Abrams.
Never heard of him. But then I never had any use for a gynecologist.
Miss Bird, Mercy, what is it about Mr. Wharton that you don't like?
Oh, Newt.
There's nothing I do like about Mr. Wharton. Nothing at all.
Why?
Because he thinks he's God Almighty. That's why.
Somehow, despite the obvious evidence of her disdain for Rudolph Wharton, and now the added fact that she visited the next town of Natick regularly, I couldn't settle on Mercy Bird as the perpetrator of the poisoned pen letters, my cop's suspicious nature notwithstanding. Mercy Bird was a character, I thought, but not a nut. There was a big difference. There was something about the atmosphere in Wellesley, however, that made me glad to get back to the routine of my police job in Boston at the end of my 2-day holiday. Captain Granger made sure my relief didn't last that long.
3, continue patrol. See the woman at family. 2337 McKinley.
How's the new place out in Wellesley, dude?
Oh, fine, Captain, fine. We're getting slowly but surely straightened out there.
I just had a call from Chief Torrance out there.
About that poison pen letter business?
Poison pen letters? Wellesley has that going on, too?
Why? What else is up?
Obscene telephone calls. A whole epidemic of them.
What?
Yeah. That's some quiet little town you picked out for yourself, Severson.
Tomorrow at this time, rest your eyes and listen here to this week's continuing study in suspense, A Die in the Country. I'm Rod Serling, and this is the 0 Hour. It's never easy to pick up and move to a new community. There's always a necessary period of adjustment. Young Boston detective Newt Severson and his wife Brenda are now in the process of adapting to their new surroundings. They've just moved to the quiet suburban town of Wellesley to await the birth of their first child. They've settled into a recently remodeled 3-story Victorian house with a small patch of New England woods on one side and Miss Mercy Bird, mystery writer and the town recluse, on the other. Directly across the street lives Wellesley's most prominent citizen, Town Selectman Rudolph Wharton, subject of current gossip concerning the recent desertion of his wife. As Detective Severson soon learned, Wharton is being harassed by a series of anonymous poisoned pen letters accusing him of his wife's murder. Back at his desk at the Boston police station, Newt Severson finds that Precinct Captain Granger has a further crime report from Wellesley. Newt Severson is beginning to question the advisability of his move to the country, and he has yet to meet the rest of his neighbors. A Die in the Country will continue.
As if the threatening letters sent to Rudolph Wharton weren't enough, now we had even more to worry about.
Obscene phone calls, a whole rash of them. Seems that some kook got hold of a Wellesley phone book. The calls are occurring systematically to nearly every house in your town.
Every house?
And the caller seems to be working right through the book. Sometimes from the front of it, sometimes from the back.
What ploy does he use?
Well, he claims he's a doctor doing a survey. His research, he says, calls for answers to a number of questions. And he starts off nice enough. Pretty soon he's into the interviewee's sex life. And you know how it goes from there. Some of the ladies in your town are pretty upset.
I can imagine. But why did Torrance call you? What's the Boston connection?
Well, they've been tracing the calls when they could, but the caller he's been jumping all over the place. Once they thought they had him. Months ago, when the calls first started, a series of them were traced to one Wellesley number. Turned out to be a family on an extended vacation. And the nut, whoever he is, had made an entry through a cellar window. Never stole anything. He just used the phone.
Did they stake out the place?
Yeah, sure. But, of course, by then, the guy had found himself another Amici. After that, he used pay booze mostly. Once, even the telephone in the high school principal's office. And you don't know how he managed that.
Don't tell me he's operating all the way out of Boston.
Well, the latest calls have been traced to, of all places, a phone booth at the aquarium here.
This one sounds like a real weirdo.
Aren't they all? Torrance wants us to stake it out, and since you have a personal interest in the town, I thought you'd be the man to do it.
Has he established any time pattern?
The caller never phones at night or on the weekend. Only those hours when most women are home alone.
That figures. Any voice description?
Nobody seems to agree. So maybe there's more than one nut at work. Anyway, he could be young, he could be old.
Any chance, do you think, that he might really be a doctor?
There can be a twisted mind in any profession. You know as well as I do, anything's possible.
Yeah. It's what my wife calls a cop's suspicious nature. She's already accused me of looking at everybody in Wellesley as a suspect.
Poison pen letters, obscene phone calls. Sounds to me you have reason to.
So I waited out the day at the Boston Aquarium. But Wellesley's elusive sex nut continued to be the one that got away. At Captain Granger's suggestion, I stopped by on my way home to report to Police Chief Torrance of the Wellesley force.
Yeah, well, I'm sorry that you got sent on a wild goose chase, Everson. Today he called from a pay booth in Dedham.
You got a quick trace on him?
No, he's aware we're putting traces on him. This time he simply announced to his victim where he was calling from. Then he told me he alerted you to the crank letters being received by Rudolph Wharton.
Yeah, he asked me to keep an eye out since Wharton lives right across the street from us.
All right, we'd appreciate that.
There isn't any doubt about that letter you received from Mrs. Wharton confirming her whereabouts, is there? I mean, no suspicion of forgery or anything.
Good God, man. Wharton is one of our selectmen, remember? Oh, all right, I'm a cop. I know better, so I placed a person-to-person call to her that I paid for myself. Didn't want it to show up on the department phone bills. Our selectmen have to approve all monthly vouchers.
So you actually talked to her then?
Well, she talked to me is more like it. Told me off for wasting my time tracking her down when I should be tracking down the people sending the letters.
I'd like to have a copy of whatever record you have of the calls, and also photostats of the Wharton letters.
Oh, you can get both of those from the clerk on your way out.
Hey, now, I guess I'd better be getting home to my wife.
Well, let's hope our women don't get the idea that there's some kind of fiend loose on our streets. But in point of fact, there is.
It's me, honey.
In the living room, Newt. Come on in and meet Mrs. Farley.
The Farleys in the house catty-corner across the street. I remembered Mrs. Parsons' rundown on them. Congenial couple with the two potential teenage delinquents. I walked in and saw a faded blonde in a red pantsuit sitting across the coffee table from Brenda.
Gloria Farley, my husband, Newt.
Pleased to meet you.
I was just apologizing to your wife for not having come over sooner. I keep rather busy running a house with 2 children and holding down a job as well.
I can understand that.
I can't imagine it. Just the thought of a house with 1 baby, and it scares me.
In particular, I came to invite you and your wife to a party this Saturday evening. Our house. You'll meet my husband and a few friends.
Oh, that sounds nice. It'll be our first evening out in Wellesley.
Oh, then I'm glad I thought of it. Late but sincere, that's me.
Thanks for asking us. It's just what we need, really.
Good. It's nice to have new neighbors, especially compatible ones.
After Gloria Farley had left, while Brenda put the finishing touches on a meatloaf dinner, I was going to get busy on that homework I'd asked Chief Torrance for. But instead, it seemed Mine Hair was late for his dinner, and Brenda asked me to go make sure he wasn't out squirrel hunting again. Here, kitty, kitty, kitty. Come on, Mine Hair. Hey, where are you, cat?
If you're looking for your cat, I think I may have him. Is this one yours?
He is. I didn't think he'd cross the street. My name's Severson. You're Mr. Wharton.
Yes. And it's my fault. I like cats, and he's a beautiful animal. I lured him over.
He's not used to all this freedom. We've been apartment dwellers in Boston.
You're a detective, I understand.
That's right.
Well, our crime here is of the minor variety as a rule, and not much of it at that.
That suits me. I get enough of it on the job.
Care to come in for a drink?
Oh, thanks, but I think my dinner's on the table. I'll have to take a rain check, if I may.
Of course.
Wharton gave Mine Hair one final stroke and handed him to me. And as he did, I was struck by a curious resemblance. There was a look about their eyes that seemed the same, his and the cat's. I said goodnight and walked back across the street, running my hand thoughtfully across Mine Hair's glossy fur. I found myself wondering which look it had been, that of our formerly docile house cat, or the killer it had become. Chief Torrance was right about the obscene phone call list. It was hard to find a handle. I charted the calls on a calendar and didn't come up with anything beyond my own frustration. I thought I had a thread, 4 calls on consecutive Mondays from a pay booth outside the Wellesley Railroad Station between the hours of 8:30 and 9:30. Could be a commuter. But then the pay booth number dropped from the list and was never used again. Sometimes he called 4 or 5 days in a row, and another time a week went by without a complaint. Of course, maybe that was only a time when those women he called hadn't bothered to report it. That was too often our problem. On the one hand, there were the cranks who bothered us about nothing, and on the other, there were always those who came up against real crime and kept it a big, dark secret, even from the police. By the time Saturday night came, I was ready for that party at the Farleys and curious about who was going to be there.
Hello, Jefferson. Come in and name your poison.
Gloria Farley beckoned us into the high-ceiling living room and gestured us toward the bar set up on top of a baby grand piano. Obviously, the Farleys were more drinkers than music lovers, and, as it turned out, drama buffs. All of the people invited were members of the local little theater group, a kind of unisex couple appropriately named Chris and Christine, a second couple, the Kletz, Harvey and Angel, and Dolly Celine, a buxom redhead who instantly established her status as a widow in a plainly seductive tone of voice. Then we briefly met the Farley children, Delilah and Greg. I say briefly because they were both obviously eager to get out of the house. Perfectly normal for two teenagers when their parents are throwing a party. However, Gloria Farley was perturbed with them for rushing off in front of company.
Delilah, I want you home at a decent hour, do you hear? And Greg, don't be in such a hurry. Please drive slowly. Do you have your house key? They never want to stay home anymore. Oh, here's Arlen, my husband.
There was a sudden whir of a motor, and we followed Gloria Farley's gaze to the top of the stairs. At that moment, a chair device came gliding down the staircase bearing Arlen Farley, a big-chested man with a full head of wavy white hair and a wide smile that revealed a mouthful of sparkling white teeth. At the foot of the stairs, he rose from the chair and walked toward us.
I had a coronary last year, and the doctor recommended this chariot. It's kind of fun, and it makes a great entrance.
Very impressive.
These are our new neighbors, Arlen, Brenda and Newt Severson. I'll fix your ginger ale.
Yeah, thanks, honey. Yeah, to get off the hard stuff. Cigarettes, too, the penalty for a misspent youth. Gloria tells me you're a cop.
Detective. Boston Police. What's your business?
Prosthetics, false teeth. If you ever need a pair of choppers, I'm your man.
For goodness sake, I'm sure we have more interesting things to talk about than false teeth.
I do. I bet no one can guess what happened to me the other day. All right, then. I'll tell you. Got one of those dirty phone calls. Oh, Dolly, how awful.
Oh, maybe it wasn't so awful. Maybe Dolly enjoyed it.
Arlen! Oh, don't pretend to be so shocked, Gloria. I did enjoy it for a while until... Well, he did go a little too far.
You mean you just hung on and let him keep talking to you?
At first I thought he was legitimate. He said he was a doctor. Dr. Venable, he said.
Mrs. Celine.
Dolly. Please, Mr. Severson.
Did you report the call to the police?
Why, no. Should I have?
When did you say this happened? Exactly. I mean, can you remember?
I guess it must have been the day before yesterday, sometime in the afternoon. I certainly don't remember the time exactly. It wasn't that important.
What did he say to you? I mean, why did you think it was legitimate?
Well, Christy asked for Robert, my late husband, you know. His name's still in the directory. And then he explained he was interviewing married women or women who've been married for survey.
What kind of questions did he ask?
Yeah, doll, what kind of questions did he ask?
Arlen, this isn't funny.
To start with, just ordinary questions, like how long I'd been married and how long we'd dated beforehand, just things like that.
And then what?
Then he began asking some very personal things. I mean, he wanted to know every little detail.
I'll bet.
So finally I asked him, is this necessary? And he said, oh, yes, it's a very important part of the survey.
And you bought that?
I explained that all the information I was giving him would be fed into a computer and be strictly anonymous. And then he told me if I'd answer all the rest of his questions, he'd put me on his paid subject list. He said persons who are particularly helpful to him get paid.
I'll bet.
Arlen, will you stop saying that?
So then you answered all the rest of his questions, huh?
Yeah, some.
Good God, Dolly, how could you? A perfectly strange man over the telephone or not.
And they finally got so to him, look, what are you? A dirty old man.
And, what did he say to that?
There was a long silence. I thought I'd made him angry, and then suddenly he laughed. He had quite a pleasant laugh, and he said, Mrs. Celine, to meet you.
Dolly, you didn't.
No, of course not.
I told him that I wasn't going to answer any more questions either, not even for money.
Then did you hang up on him?
Finally. No. He thanked me and hung up himself.
He thanked you?
That was nice. He did have a pleasant life. He did. Maybe he was legitimate.
What kind of speaking voice did he have? Can you describe it?
Deep. Kind of silky. Well, to put it plainly, he had a sexy voice. It's the only way to describe it.
Dolly.
I think, Mrs. Celine, you'd better tell all of this to the police.
Mr. Sevenson. Newt. You're a policeman, aren't you? And I've just told it all to you.
Oh, what a dreadful woman.
You mean Mrs. Celine?
Just call me Dolly, you big, handsome policeman.
Hey, you weren't jealous, were you?
Oh, jealous of her? Imagine going on and on with that kind of telephone conversation.
Honey, she's a widow without a man. She must be very lonely.
Oh, she wasn't lonely tonight. You spent practically the entire evening with her.
I wanted to find out all I could about the phone conversation.
I'll bet.
Come on, Brenda. What's gotten into you? You never act like this.
Well, I've never had reason to before. Of course, I suppose I really shouldn't blame you. It can't be very exciting going to bed every night with an old sack of potatoes.
Aha, so that's it. Oh, darling, I don't care how pregnant you get. You'll always look better to me than any voluptuous redhead.
Oh, Newt.
And you don't have to worry about Dolly Celine. She isn't my type, first of all, and I promise you I won't ever see or talk to her again. Hello? Oh. Yes, what is it, Mrs. Celine? Dolly? It turned out all Dolly Celine wanted was more attention. The woman was lonely, perfect prey for a telephone nut. She was also more frightened about the call than she acted at the party. She knew she had done a foolish thing, so again I referred her to the Wellesley Police Department, said a polite goodnight, and hung up. My attention at the moment was in full demand upstairs in my own bedroom. The next week or so passed more or less serenely at home, while my job provided all the excitement I wanted, and sometimes more than I asked for. When I got home tonight, I was really ready to put my feet up with a beer. But I didn't mind at all when I found company in the kitchen. It was Mercy Bird, and we hadn't seen much of her lately.
Busy on a book, that's why. Nobody sees me when I'm writing. How's your cat, by the way? I've had to let Algernon shift for himself lately, so I hope he hasn't been giving Mine Hair a problem.
Mine Hair's taken to spending a lot of time across the street. It seems Rudolph Wharton is a cat lover. You still don't like the man, I take it.
How can you not like a man who looks like Cary Grant on The Late Show?
Well, like they say, you can't judge a book. The man's no good. My mother died in his rest home, you know.
I didn't know that.
Mm-hmm.
The place is okay, isn't it? I mean, good doctors, good care.
And bloody expensive. But I'm not saying anything against the doctors. It's Rudolph Wharton I blame.
That doesn't seem fair.
Well, you don't know the man like I do. You don't know what he did to his wife.
What do you mean? What did he do to his wife?
Well, she was a Mayhew, you know. There was Ernestine and her sister Eulalie, and their father, Clarence Mayhew, owned half this town in his day.
You mean that's how Wharton acquired all his property?
Exactly. By marrying Ernestine Mayhew.
But there's nothing wrong with that.
It's what happened to Ernestine Mayhew that I'm talking about. She was a gay, lively thing until she married that one. Then she changed.
Changed? How?
Well, she changed completely. She became quiet and somber. Quiet and somber as a grave.
Oh?
Newt, this is Dolly Celine.
Dolly, what?
I'm frightened. I'm all alone here, and there's something wrong. Somebody's outside the house. I just know it.
Well, why don't you call the police?
They won't believe me. I'm afraid they think I'm something of a pest. Please, Newt, you're only a few blocks away. I wouldn't call in the middle of the night if I weren't scared stiff. Will you come over?
All right.
Oh, thank you, Newt. I feel safer already.
Whatever you do, if there's someone there, don't let him in.
I won't unless he's you. Please, Newt, hurry.
The house looked completely dark. I thought maybe Dolly Celine had given up and gone to bed. But then I spied the shades of a color TV, ghosts moving in a box through the living room window. I got out of my car and moved slowly up the walk, keeping a careful eye on the surrounding shrubbery. It was so dark I couldn't see where the doorbell was, so I knocked. Mrs. Celine? Mrs. Celine?
No, Ray.
Mrs. Celine?
No. No. Please.
Dolly, I can't see you. Something moved on the floor. A sifting of shadows. I felt along the wall, found a switch, and flicked it. The hall light came on, and I saw her. Dolly Celine lying on the floor, dark splotches on her face and arms, bruises and blood. Blood redder than her hair.
He came, Newt. The telephoner. He came.
Tomorrow at this time, rest your eyes and listen here to this week's continuing study in suspense, A Die in the Country. I'm Rod Serling, and this is The Zero Hour. In this, our mobile society, the act of physically moving one's family from one town to another is a relatively simple matter. The problem is leaving old friends behind and making new ones. Detective Newt Severson and his wife Brenda, having recently moved from Boston to the small suburban town of Wellesley, have begun making those new friends. However, they find themselves becoming more deeply involved in a web of intrigue and violence among their neighbors. While on an innocent errand to return a lost dog to their next-door neighbor, Mercy Bird, Newt has come upon startling evidence which tends to incriminate still another of their new Wellesley friends. City living was never quite like this. A Die in the Country resumes.
What are you doing in here?
I found Algernon.
It looks as if that's not all you found.
Why, Mercy? Why have you been sending these letters to Rudolph Wharton?
Because it's true. The man murdered his wife.
What makes you even think that?
I don't think it. I know it. Don't ask me how. I just do.
Then you've no evidence, no proof.
Not the kind you mean. But I know the kind of man Rudolph Wharton is, and I know the kind of person Ernestine Mayhew was. She wouldn't just go away like that. He killed her, I tell you.
Mercy, making such a terrible accusation against the man with no proof is going to land you in serious trouble.
Why doesn't somebody look for proof? If a man like Wharton wanted to get rid of a body, he'd find a way. Has anybody dug up his cellar, unlocked his trunks, examined his flower bed?
Mercy, you've been writing too many mystery stories.
You're a detective, aren't you? You know damn well murders are committed and bodies are hidden all the time. The only difference is nobody's looking for this one.
Nobody is looking for Ernestine Mayhew's body because the woman is alive and well, living with her sister in California. Chief Torrance has a letter from her, and he also talked to her on the telephone.
Oh, then the police do suspect something.
No. They acted on those letters, of course, to prove they were a hoax.
A hoax? That's exactly what Rudolph Wharton is pulling off. Don't you see?
See what?
Oh, of course. You don't know about Ernestine and her sister.
What about them?
That they look and sound so much alike. Could almost be twins, those two. I'll bet it was Eulalie that the chief got the letter from and talked to on the telephone.
That might work for one of your books, but how could Rudolph Wharton persuade Eulalie Mayhew to masquerade as her sister? Then she'd know that he had killed her.
Perhaps she does know.
And is just going along with it?
There's something else you don't know about the Mayhew sisters. They were both in love with Rudolph Wharton.
Oh, Newt, you're not going to the police about Mercy, are you?
Honey, I have to do something. This kind of thing just can't be ignored.
You don't suppose that there's a chance she's right about Rudolph Wharton?
That he's a murderer? Huh. Now who's looking at our neighbors like a cop?
But why would Mercy do this?
Well, we know she's a little eccentric, and I suppose as a mystery writer she may be inclined to let her imagination run amok.
Living all alone in that creepy house.
You know, there's hardly any furniture inside. I mean, from what I could see.
Keeping her mother in that rest home must have been very expensive.
Yeah. And a rest home owned by the rich Rudolph Wharton, no less.
But she shouldn't be put in jail just for harboring a grudge.
Sending threatening letters is more than just harboring a grudge. It's all going to depend on Wharton. I mean, what he wants to do about it after he finds out it's Mercy. Maybe he'll be charitable and not press charges.
Are you going to talk to him or the police?
I don't know. There's some sniffing around I want to do first.
Oh, darling, if anybody can help Mercy, you can. I think I'm glad I'm married to a bulldog after all.
My first stop was the town clerk's office in Town Hall, a red stone castle on top of the hill. I didn't think it wise to chance Rudolph Wharton's finding out that I'd been checking for information on his wife. So I made up a story to tell the clerk that wangled me a look at the alphabetical file under M. It took only a quick flip of the cards for me to get what I'd come for. Eulalie Mayhew's present address in California, where ostensibly both sisters could be found. My next stop was the public library. With luck in a small town like this, I'd find copies of the Wellesley High School annuals there. I did. Should be the 40s, I figured. And I was right. The summer class of 1941 for Ernestine, 42 for Eulalie. I placed the pictures of the two sisters side by side. Heart-shaped faces, light eyes, identical blonde hairdos of the pompadour and page boy style of the time. Even looking closely at them as I was doing, it was hard to see the difference between them. But did they sound alike as well, I wondered. I got a telephone number for Eulalie Mayhew from the long-distance operator. Riverside, California. Information.
Hello?
Hello, Miss Mayhew?
Yes.
Is this Miss Eulalie Mayhew?
Yes, it is. Who's this?
Hi, Lester Martin, Wellesley High, class of 41. Do you remember me?
I don't believe I knew you. I didn't graduate until a year after that.
Oh, I know. Your sister Ernestine was in my class. I understand she's staying there with you right now. Is that right?
Yes, she is.
Well, it's Ernestine I really called to talk to. It's quite important. Is she there?
Yes, she's here. Just a moment. Hello?
Eulalie?
No, this is Ernestine.
Ernestine Mayhew. How are you? This is Lester Martin. Long time no see.
Yes, my sister told me you were on the phone. I'm afraid it's been longer than I'd care to admit.
I'll bet you're wondering why I called.
To be honest, I don't have the faintest notion.
Well, we're planning a class reunion. Thanksgiving Day, the old football rivalry, you know. It'll be a real homecoming. Can you make it?
Well, I don't know. I've been thinking of perhaps making a trip abroad soon.
Oh?
Who else is going to be at the reunion?
Oh, Clarence Masters, Nella Mawhinney. I was given only the M's to call, so I don't know about the others.
Then you wouldn't know if Patsy Oliver is coming?
Patsy? No, she's not on my list.
I'll have to think about it.
I'll send you a letter with all the details, just as soon as they're worked out, of course.
Thank you.
You're welcome, Ernestine. Nice talking to you. And you know something?
What?
You and your sister sure sound exactly alike.
Well, you must have forgotten, Lester. We always did.
My phone call to California gave me nothing to go on. But for some reason, I suddenly thought of an old friend in Los Angeles. A private gumshoe named Jess Dyer, who I knew would do me a favor. A little stakeout at the Mayhew house, and maybe some discreet checking with the neighbors. Meanwhile, I decided to drop in for another little off-the-cuff chat with Chief Torrance down at the Wellesley police station. I was wondering, When you talked to Mrs. Wharton, what did you ask her? Did you find out when exactly she left Wellesley and how she got to California? Anything like that?
Well, I didn't interrogate her, if that's what you mean. No reason to. All I needed to know was that she was alive.
I suppose so. Only...
What are you getting at, Severson? I hope you don't have the idea that I didn't check thoroughly just because it was Wharton.
No, I wasn't thinking that.
There have been people in this town from time to time who've tried to buy me, but they've learned quick enough that I'm not their boy.
I can tell that.
Okay, I just wanted to set things straight, in case. Because I'm getting the notion that you've got an itch.
An itch?
That's what I call it when it happens to me. An itch I can't scratch keeps me up nights sometimes. A feeling that something's out of kilter, off the mark.
Yeah. I guess maybe that's what I got.
And I gather you're thinking maybe it's a place I can reach that you can't.
Maybe it is. What can you tell me about the Mayhew sisters, for instance? I hear they look and sound a lot alike.
Well, that's true enough, especially in their younger days when they dressed alike, wore their hair the same way and everything. Later on, they didn't do that anymore, of course.
I also hear that at one time, at least, they were both in love with Rudolph Wharton.
Yeah, I suppose they were. That'd be back in their younger days, too, before Wharton settled on Ernestine. I remember when my wife and I used to go to the steakhouse in those days. We'd see the three of them, young Wharton, as handsome then as he is now, with the Mayhew girls, one on each arm. Both of them looking up at him like he was God.
Is there anybody in town, anybody you can think of that Ernestine Mayhew would be likely to keep in touch with, no matter where she is?
Yep, one person, Constance Giordi. Taught both the Mayhew girls, but Ernestine apparently always felt something special for her. She's the first person I tried to check when Wharton started getting those letters.
And?
You notice I said tried. I asked her if she heard from Ernestine, and all she said was, wherever Ernestine was Ernestine's own business, and I should mind my own.
Where does she live?
Over in Back Bay on Oak Street in a little house Ernestine gave her, scot-free. She's the one to talk to about Ernestine, all right. But I don't envy you trying.
I caught a faint movement of the lace curtain across the glass panel door, and I rang again.
Go away, whoever you are.
I'm not going to, Miss Giordi. I need to see you.
Who are you, anyway? I never saw you before.
I know. I haven't lived here in Wellesley long. I'm a detective from Boston, and I want to speak to you about Ernestine. Ernestine Mayhew?
I just want to know one thing from you, whoever you are. Is Ernestine in any kind of trouble?
I don't know. That's what I want to talk to you about.
Well, then come in. Whatever it isn't any business of the neighbors.
I stepped inside into a room that smelled of oriental rugs and furniture polish. Constance Giordi peered into my face with eyes like a pair of shiny black marbles.
In the first place, you haven't even told me your name.
Oh, I'm sorry. It's Severson. Newt Severson. My wife and I moved here recently. Our house is directly across the street from Rudolph Wharton. Miss Giordi, do you have any way of knowing that Ernestine Mayhew is all right?
All right? What do you mean by that?
If you could tell me that you've heard from her, then...
But I can't tell you that, Mr. Severson, because I haven't. Not a word.
Isn't that unusual? I'm told you're the one she's most likely to be in touch with.
If she chose to, but there's no reason she should.
But doesn't it seem strange to you that she apparently left town without telling anyone that she was leaving?
Oh, but she didn't do that, Mr. Severson. She told me.
She did?
Of course. She telephoned and told me she was leaving Rudolph Wharton at last. Well, I told her, good riddance. I hoped she'd leave him the way she found him, without a penny.
Then Ernestine knew of your dislike for her husband.
Oh, naturally. I spoke against the man from the first moment she and Eulalie took up with him.
Eulalie was in love with him, too?
And I told Ernestine she should let Eulalie have him. Eulalie would have been a better match for him. She wouldn't have let the man walk all over her the way Ernestine allowed him to.
Then Ernestine and Eulalie were not as alike as they appear to be in the photographs?
Oh, they only looked alike.
And sounded alike?
Well, yes, that was strange. One might swear that their voices were identical.
Then someone might talk to one of them on the telephone and not be certain whether it was Ernestine or her sister.
Yes, that's true.
In that case, Miss Giordi, the only evidence we have that Ernestine Mayhew is safely in California is this letter. Chief Torrance received it in answer to his inquiry.
Mr. Severson, this letter was not written by Ernestine Mayhew.
It wasn't? Are you sure?
I'm positive. Now, even I couldn't always tell them apart by their appearance. Often I'd have to look to see which one of them was speaking. But as their school teacher, I learned to distinguish their handwriting. I am positive. This letter was written by Eulalie Mayhew.
I felt a chill when the old woman told me with such certainty that the letter had not been written by Ernestine, but by her sister. Maybe Mercy Bird, with all her talk of murder, wasn't so far off base after all. But I knew about handwriting evidence in court. One expert verified a forgery, a second expert repudiated the testimony of the first. Although I wondered who would dare to repudiate Constance Giordi. I was in the mood now to have that chat with Rudolph Wharton regarding Mercy's imprudent, threatening notes. I had a feeling I was going to find Wharton inclined to be lenient. I found him in his office in a building that housed a bank, a pharmacy, and a department store, all belonging to Wharton, I presumed. He sounded even more tolerant than I'd expected.
Poor Mercy. She never quite got over her mother's death. They were very close.
Yes, I gather that.
She blames me for it, as perhaps she's told you. You know, I've always thought that strange. It's natural enough to blame someone, the doctor of the fates, but just because I happen to own the nursing home?
Yes, that must be the reason for her sending you those letters. But why do you suppose she would accuse you of killing your wife?
Well, she's always been fond of Ernestine, I think. Ernestine tolerated her. I suppose somehow she associated my wife's departure with the death of her mother. Two people she was fond of.
Yes. I guess that's possible.
She's inclined to be, eccentric. As I'm sure you've noticed. Eccentric is putting it kindly.
She's something of a character, all right.
But harmless enough, I imagine.
Then, are you going to press charges against her?
No, I don't think that'll be necessary.
That's very generous of you, considering the harassment she's caused you.
Well, perhaps it might be well for her to see a psychiatrist. There's a good man at the hospital I could refer her to.
I doubt that she has the money for that kind of treatment.
Well, something could be worked out, I'm sure.
Thank you, Mr. Wharton. You're being most considerate. I'm glad. As a matter of fact, my wife and I have become quite fond of Mercy Bird, and I wouldn't want to see her in any real trouble.
By the way, Mr. Severson, I've had a call from my wife.
You have?
Yes. She was puzzling over a phone call she received. The caller identified himself as someone who'd been in high school with her, and he invited her to a class reunion.
What's puzzling about that? Someone's always trying to get up a high school class reunion.
Of course. But then she asked the man if Patsy Oliver was coming, and he answered that he didn't know because she wasn't on the list.
What's wrong with that?
Well, Patsy Oliver was a very popular figure at Wellesley High in those years. I remember him well. Patsy was a nickname for Patrick.
Oh. Well, I tell your wife not to worry. Memory plays tricks on people. We all know that. Don't we, Mr. Wharton? I wasn't worried about that little blunder I'd made. I was only wondering what kind of call Rudolph Wharton had really received. Leaving Wharton's office, I threw caution out of the window by walking into the bank and making an inquiry about Ernestine Mayhew Wharton's account. I showed my Boston ID card, and after a long moment's hesitation, the bank official obliged.
Well, yes, Mrs. Wharton has an account with us.
A separate account of her own?
That's right.
I need to know what withdrawals Mrs. Wharton has made since January of this year.
Oh, well, just a moment. That I'll have to check.
You understand, of course, sir, this inquiry must be kept entirely confidential?
Yes. Yes, of course. Just a moment.
He picked up a telephone, and I wondered if he was checking with a bookkeeper or with Wharton.
Mr. Severson.
Yes.
I must say it does seem rather odd, but Mrs. Wharton has made no withdrawals at all from her account since January.
Chief Torrance wasn't going to like it, but I figured it was time for us to have another little talk. I was right. He didn't like it.
Damn it, Severson. I don't need this can of worms. I don't need it at all.
I can understand your position.
And it seems to me everything you've dug up is still pure speculation.
Even Constance Giordi's statement? She told me she'd swear on her family Bible that your letter ostensibly from Ernestine was actually written by Eulalie.
That's the one thing I can't ignore, I'll give you that.
Then the reasonable doubt is now on the side of Mercy Bird, don't you think?
I suppose once you allow yourself to even consider the possibility of murder, town selectmen notwithstanding, you've... Very well, Severson. Let's assume that we have a case and get on it.
Yes, sir.
Here's something to start with. After you brought up the subject, I checked out the passenger list on the flights out of Boston at the time of Ernestine Wharton's assumed departure.
And?
And Eve Wharton flew out of Boston bound for Los Angeles on January 10th. If it wasn't Ernestine, it was somebody else.
Eulalie.
Yeah. Well, considering we're going along with this whole assumption, I suppose it could have been, although you'd think somebody around Wellesley would have seen her while she was here.
They might have and thought it was Ernestine. If Eulalie were deliberately assuming her sister's identity.
All right. And what we want to find out is, if there was a flight into Boston from L.A. sometime just before the 10th that shows an E. Mayhew on the passenger list.
Exactly.
Yes. I'll put it through. Call for you, Severson.
My wife, I told her I'd be here. You see, our baby's due any time now.
Then get on this phone, man, for heaven's sake.
Hello? Hi, Brenda. Are you all right? When? I'll be right home. It wasn't our baby, it was yours.
Mine?
You can forget Greg Farley. Your obscene caller's still on the loose. He just called my wife.
Tomorrow at this time, rest your eyes and listen here to this week's continuing study in suspense, A Die in the Country. I'm Rod Serling, and this is The Zero Hour. All that the Seversons wanted was to move away from Boston to a quiet little house in the country, and that's precisely what they did. However, there were a great many unexpected bonuses thrown into the bargain. Threatening letters, obscene phone calls, wife-swapping neighbors, a strange disappearance, and an accusation of murder. As Detective Newt Severson, with the reluctant cooperation of Wellesley Police Chief Torrance, presses for an investigation into the affairs of Town Selectman Rudolph Wharton, Wellesley's elusive, obscene telephone caller strikes again. This time with a call to Severson's young wife, Brenda, while she's home alone, awaiting the impending birth of their first child. For Newt Severson, life in the country is about to explode and reverberate down to the very foundation of his existence. In a moment, the conclusion of A Die in the Country.
I was furious with myself for not being home with Brenda at this crucial stage of her pregnancy. I was just caught up in this Wharton business, so when Brenda got that crank phone call, it just set me off. Never mind Rudolph Wharton and whether or not he did or didn't murder his wife. Let's get this damn phone freak out of circulation.
Calm down, Severson. Just get on home to your wife. We're working on this telephone business.
There's one thing, Chief. This puts young Farley in the clear about everything except that car theft charge.
And he can probably be released to the custody of his parents pending his arraignment, if they want it that way.
I think maybe they will. I'll get back to you on the Wharton case as soon as I'm satisfied my wife feels okay.
And I'll get on the airlines angle meanwhile. Oh, but will you do me a favor, Severson? Play this close until if and when we really have something.
Yeah, I know. Wait a minute. This call to Brenda gives us something new on the phone nut.
What's that?
He didn't work from the Wellesley directory this time. We're not in it.
He must have gotten it from information, then.
No, he couldn't have. We have an unlisted number.
That's what I've been wondering, too, Newt. How did he get our number?
Did he address you by name?
Yes, right away. He said, "Hello, Mrs. Severson."
But you didn't recognize the voice at all?
No, it was deep and, sort of suave sounding.
Yeah, Dolly Celine called it sexy.
Oh, well, I'm not Dolly Celine. I would have hung up on him right away, but I knew you'd want me to find out everything I could.
Thanks, but I hope you didn't stick with that nut too long.
I couldn't. It was just, it was too much. I had to hang up.
What time was this? Just before you called me?
Yes, about 4:30.
Later than usual for him.
I just wish I knew how he got our number.
So do I. If we knew that, it might tell us who he is. The thing to do is make a list of everybody who knows our number or anybody who's been inside the house where they could have seen it on the phone.
That could have been, even any of the workmen who've been here.
Exactly.
Even that sweet little old man who hung on you wallpaper?
Darling, I'm a suspicious cop, remember? That sweet little old man could very well have a sexy telephone voice. What a hornet's nest we'd found ourselves in with this innocent little move out into the country. Maybe Brenda was right. Other people seem to live out their lives without coming up against murder, robbery, assault, and heaven knows what. I was beginning to wonder myself, did the crime attract the cop, or did the cop attract the crime? It didn't matter. At the moment, I considered myself on a possible murder case, and I figured by now my contact in California had had time enough to check out that house and its neighbors in Riverside. Yes, it's Newt. Find out anything for me?
I don't know, but for what it's worth, here's the rundown. The neighbors don't seem to know anything about his sister, but then they say Eulalie Mayhew isn't much of the neighborly type.
You mean her sister could be there, and they wouldn't know it, huh?
That was the impression they gave me.
But none of them could say that they'd seen both sisters together?
No, I didn't get that from anybody, but for your information, at the moment there's nobody living in the house.
What do you mean, nobody?
Whether there was one sister or two, they're not there now.
The next morning at headquarters, I passed Dyer's information on to Chief Torrance.
So, what do you think it means?
I'd like to find out from Wharton what it means, but I don't want to flush him out at this point.
Maybe Eulalie Mayhew has already flown the coop.
No, it wouldn't make sense. I mean, Wharton still needs her around, right? Oh, by the way, does Eulalie have any of her father's holdings?
No, Ernestine was the old man's favorite. Eulalie was left just with an annuity. More than adequate, I understand, but it was a definite slight.
That gives Eulalie a bit of a motive, too, doesn't it?
Oh, not for murder, I shouldn't think. But I suppose it could weaken her resistance against aiding and abetting.
Any luck on that check of the airlines?
Not yet. There's a chance she wouldn't have used her own name, of course. Yes? Oh, yes, of course. Tell him to come in. Wharton's on his way in. Mr. Wharton, how are you?
Hello, Chief. Severson, they told me you were in here, and I was hoping to talk to both of you.
Well, what's up, Mr. Wharton?
Well, for one thing, I just learned that my wife has left the country.
Oh?
She's gone on an extended trip. I don't know for how long. Hawaii, the Orient, perhaps?
Around the world?
I don't know, Mr. Severson. My sister-in-law tells me she wasn't certain. In fact, Eulalie is quite concerned about Ernestine.
In what way?
Well, it seems our separation has been weighing heavily on her. She's been very depressed. And now, suddenly, she's just packed up and gone. Eulalie's quite distraught.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that, Mr. Wharton. Any way we can be of help?
No, there's nothing even I can do. We're just hoping Ernestine will be in touch with one of us, soon.
It wouldn't be too difficult to locate her, I imagine, if we get on it quickly enough.
No, I wouldn't want her to think I was keeping tabs on her. She wanted her freedom. I think maybe a trip is a good idea for her at this time.
Yeah, probably is.
Frankly, at the moment, it's Eulalie I'm concerned about. I didn't think she should be alone out there worrying about her sister, so I suggested that she come here, back to Wellesley for a while.
Well, now, it'll be nice to see Eulalie Mayhew again. You're going to enjoy meeting her, Severson. She's quite a woman.
Yes, I'd like very much to meet her.
You'll have the opportunity. That's why I'm here. You'll both come, won't you?
Come? Come where?
To my house, Saturday night. I'm throwing a little party for Eulalie to welcome her home.
Brenda's only concern when I told her about Wharton's party was which of her maternity dresses looked the least like a maternity dress. My concern was that I had Dr. Abrams' number in my pocket. It would be just like our stubborn son and heir to put in his belated appearance just as I was closing in on a murder.
I wonder if he's invited any of the other neighbors.
Mercy Bird wouldn't come if they asked her.
Mercy's only come out of her house long enough to give Algernon a quick walk lately. She must be busy writing a new book.
As long as she's not writing any more letters.
What about the Farleys? Do you think they'll be there?
I doubt it. I gather the only neighborliness between the Whartons and the Farleys was Ernestine Wharton's friendship with young Greg.
It's a shame she isn't around to help him now.
Maybe not. Maybe his own parents will come through for him this time.
Is Greg still in jail?
No. His mother brought him home this afternoon.
Oh, Newt, doesn't it scare you? Pretty soon we're going to be parents.
I don't know. Junior is sure taking his time about getting here.
I don't blame him, considering all that's been going on.
Well, tell him to hold off at least a few more hours. I don't think Rudolph Wharton's cocktail party is going to be any place to have a baby. Saturday couldn't come fast enough for me. Call it my suspicious cop nature, but I was certain the party would be a showdown. I spent any free time I had at home nursing along the ivy I'd planted around the railing of our porch. I was hoping to catch a glimpse, a sneak preview of Eulalie Mayhew. But I never saw a sign of her, or Wharton for that matter. Finally...
Hello, Severson.
You know my wife?
Yes, of course. Good of you to join us, Mrs. Severson. Come in. I want you to meet Eulalie.
Before he had led us halfway across the room, I saw her. Shining silver gold hair, a flawless skin, glowing under a golden California suntan. Eyes the color of pansies, a young girl's body in a sleek gold cocktail dress. So, that was Eulalie Mayhew. I found myself wondering if Ernestine, wherever she was, still looked like her sister.
Ludy tells me you're a detective.
That's right.
Mr. Severson is with the Boston police, but it appears he's intrigued by our little transgressions in Wellesley as well. Which reminds me, I believe Chief Torrance has some news for you, Severson. He's right over there.
A detective? A police chief? Well, it appears Rudy has himself surrounded by the law. What a lovely outfit you have on, Mrs. Severson.
Thank you.
Will this be your first?
I left Brenda gazing enviously at Eulalie Mayhew's sylph-like figure and made my way across the room to see what Torrance had come up with. If it were the information we'd been after from the airlines, Wharton unwittingly may have just directed me toward his own undoing.
Oh, Severson, you'll want to hear this. Dennehy called in a little while ago with quite a piece of news.
Concerning our genial host?
No, not this time. It's the telephone nut. We've got him.
Hallelujah. Are you sure? I mean, how did you find him?
It was that list you had your wife make up that did it. You know, all the workmen who had been in your house since you moved in.
Now, don't tell me it was the sweet little old man who hung the wallpaper.
Nah, but you're close. Try the nice, clean-cut all-American type who installed your telephone.
A guy from the telephone company? Why is it we never think of the obvious?
Seems he just kind of blends into the woodwork. Nobody pays any attention to him.
And once he's done his job, you forget he was there.
But when we went back and checked, we found him everywhere. When Dennehy moved in on him in a cruddy little apartment over in Needham, there it was. A little yellow Wellesley directory. And a raft of porno junk all over the place.
Did he own up?
To everything but the Dolly Saline attack, claims he never done any real harm to anyone. Just a talker, not a doer, according to him.
Do you buy that?
Dennehy does. He thinks the guy called her all right, but he never went near her.
But then, how do you explain...
I don't know. We're going to have another talk with Mrs. Saline.
Chief, here comes Dennehy now. What's he doing here?
I don't know, but he sure is in a hurry. I hope he doesn't knock anybody over. What is it, Dennehy?
That piece of information you've been waiting for just came in, Chief.
From the airline?
You really hit the nail on the head, Newt. On January 9th, just the day before an E. Wharton flew out of Boston, and E. Mayhew flew in from L.A.
Well, now, isn't that interesting?
Uh-huh.
I think maybe our host will find it much more stimulating than the usual cocktail party conversation. I took pity on the chief and went to look for Wharton myself. I found him more or less where I expected, on the terrace in the shadows with a glint of gold lame beside him. Sorry to disturb you, Mr. Wharton, but something's come up about your wife.
Rudy.
What about my wife, Mrs. Everson?
The chief will explain. He and Dennehy are in the study. You can come too, Miss Mayhew, if you wish.
Yes, of course. Has anything happened to her?
I have the feeling we'll all have an answer to that very soon. Despite Eulalie Mayhew's involuntary gasp and her alarmed look of a cornered doe, Wharton remained as unruffled as ever. I went on ahead alone to the study. A few moments later, they followed me in. Dennehy looked nervous in his uniform. I felt like our cat, mine hare, out stalking prey. Chief Torrance was less ferocious, so I let him begin.
I'm sorry, Mr. Wharton, but several things have come up that we need to have explained.
Well, that's all right, Chief. I can understand your position. Well, what sort of things?
Well, for one, that letter we received from your wife confirming her whereabouts in California.
Well, what about it?
Well, we have it on good authority, very good authority, that it was not written by your wife at all.
Really?
That instead it was written by you, Eulalie.
By me? But
Never mind, Eulalie. You don't have to deny it. I'll explain.
Please do, Mr. Wharton.
As a matter of fact, Eulalie did write the letter at my request.
Why was that?
Because Ernestine refused to. As far as I was concerned, she didn't care if I rotted in hell.
You never indicated before that there was that much animosity between you and your wife, Wharton.
Because I wanted to spare Eulalie. You see, the truth is, my wife was insanely jealous of her sister.
Oh, that's something I never knew. Ernestine didn't seem the type.
Oh, well, it was only where I was concerned. She constantly made the accusation that it was Eulalie I really loved. Eulalie I should have married.
I see.
Mr. Wharton, there's something else. We know that on January 10th, someone under your wife's name boarded a plane out of Boston for Los Angeles.
That was my wife, Sevison. Who else would it be?
Eulalie?
But Eulalie was in California, at her house in Riverside.
No, she wasn't. We have the evidence that Eulalie came here to Wellesley on January 9th.
Rudy?
If she did, Detective Sevison, I know nothing about it.
Rudy?
Were you here, Eulalie? You should have taken me into your confidence. I might have been able to help you out of this.
Rudy, what are you saying?
I knew, of course, how much resentment toward my wife Eulalie has always felt since their father died, leaving a will that favored Ernestine. But I never thought Eulalie could be capable of taking any kind of cold revenge on her sister.
That's not what happened.
Wharton, what are you trying to pull? You know very well Eulalie was here at the time of your wife's disappearance. It was at your request that she came.
But that's impossible. I had nothing to do with it. I wasn't even here in Wellesley myself at that time.
You weren't?
I was out of town, in Virginia, attending a golf tournament. And I can account for every moment of my
Look out,
time.
she's got my gun.
Eulalie, put that down. No.
Oh, Rudy. Why? I'm sorry.
It's all my fault, Chief. Get the door, Dennehy. Keep everybody out. Better call an ambulance, Newt.
No reason to. Wharton's dead. It was all in the Wellesley newspaper. It was on the front page for weeks. The gradual piecing together of the facts. Ernestine Wharton had told her husband she was divorcing him, reclaiming the titles to all of her properties and leaving him penniless. In a rage, Wharton had killed her. Killed her on the 7th of January. Greg Farley testified that he had spent most of January 6th in Ernestine Wharton's company. And January 8th was the day it was proven that Rudolph Wharton left Wellesley to attend the golf tournament in Virginia. Eulalie Mayhew arrived in Wellesley on the 9th, not knowing that her sister was dead. She maintained this stance at the trial. She swore she hadn't known and never saw the body.
Oh, come now, Miss Mayhew. It certainly would be to your advantage to cooperate at this point and tell this court where the body of your sister, Ernestine Mayhew Wharton, lies buried.
I don't know, I tell you.
Remember, she was the victim of a cold, calculating murderer, Rudolph Wharton. Where is your poor sister now, Miss Mayhew?
I don't know. I don't know. I don't know.
The trial went on, and the prosecution hammered away at Eulalie Mayhew about the location of her sister's body. The only thing in the next few weeks that was resolved was Brenda's condition. It was a 7-pound, 8-ounce boy.
Do you think Eulalie Mayhew's telling the truth, Newt?
Well, then he does. And he's become something of an authority on hysterical women, ever since he broke down that story of Dolly Celine's.
Imagine. Deliberately hurtling herself down the stairs to fake an attack just for attention.
Gradually, Wellesley finally became the quiet little suburban town we thought it would be when we first moved in, before Minehair came scampering into the house that first night with a dead squirrel in his mouth. But, of course, as Mercy Bird reminded us daily, no one had yet discovered where Rudolph Wharton had hidden his wife's body. Then one day, Brenda had just coaxed the baby into taking his afternoon nap. I was out on the porch trimming the ivy that was threatening to take over the house when...
I got it! I got it!
Honey, here comes Mercy, and she's got it. Whatever it is.
I figured it out. I knew if I just kept working on it, I'd come up with the answer.
You mean you think you know where the body's buried?
I don't think I know. I know. Now listen to this. Wharton committed the murder on January 7th. On January 8th, I had the flu. It was a Friday. I remember it well. I just sat up in bed all day looking out the window and watching the workmen.
Workmen?
Yeah, they had to delay digging earlier because the ground was frozen. But then there was an early thaw that first week in January, and they came and poured the cement that day, and I was watching them. January 8th. Now, Rudolph Wharton carried his wife's body away during the night of January 7th, put it in the hole, covered it with dirt and stones. And the next morning, the workmen came and supplied a handy cement tomb.
What workmen?
Yeah, Mercy. What are you talking about?
I'm talking about your house when it was being remodeled before you moved in. You can take my word for it. I know where the body is. We're standing on it. Ernestine Mayhew is buried right here under your front porch.
That concludes this week's production of the Zero Hour. Tobias Wells, A Die in the Country. Next week, we'll begin another exciting dramatization of a tale of mystery and suspense. We'll tell our story in 5 days, at the same time, Monday through Friday. So on Monday, rest your eyes and listen here to the Zero Hour.
You have been listening to The Zero Hour, a presentation of the Mutual Broadcasting System in association with Hollywood Radio Theater, heard every weekday at this time. Rod Serling is your host. Zero Hour is produced and directed by Elliott Lewis. The Hollywood Radio Theater theme was played by Ferranti and Teicher. Hugh Douglas speaking.
This is the Mutual Radio Network.